First up we have matte. Yeah, this is looking very good. The wood textures look realistic. Um, and there's a lot of detail in there. I think that one area for improvement is along the sides of some of these faces. Like for example here really catches the eye. You get that kind of stripy look. So maybe if you can select an individual face and assign a different texture to the face. So that's something that you could try. Also look out for obviously repeating patterns. So you kind of see the pattern on these columns, but on the door you see this kind of very clearly repeating pattern, and along this awning. So reducing the UV place 2D texture placement repeat is helpful. It's good that you have the cast shadows. That looks good. That's another good view. Nice view on that. Yeah, it's good. So yeah, overall this is good work. Came together, and just look out for those repeating textures. Just to show you what I mean, if you ever have trouble finding the material for an object, just select the object, and there's this button, Graph Materials on Selected Object, or you can go that from Graph Materials on Selected Objects, and then it should show you the all the nodes associated with the texture on that. And if this is like messy or something like that, you can hit this button right here, which is Rearranged Graph, and it'll get that sorted for you. So you see I have the shading group, the material, the file, and the place 2D texture node, and you can see that the U and V repeat is set to 1, and I can set that to 2 and 2, for example, and let's go like 8 and 8, and you can start to see like a real obvious repeating pattern here now. So sometimes the thing to do is reduce the U and V repeat. Next up is Tegan. Looks like you done a nice job on texturing the doors, and it sounded like you were struggling with the textures otherwise. One of the things is the U and V texture repeat. The other thing is I posted this other YouTube video, which I'll add to yours now as well. Looks like I already did post this here. So take a look at this video. It's a kind of another approach for texturing, where you project it on and then you can paint a layer after you do that. And it'd be great if you're stuck with something, include your scene file and texture images, and let me know where you're stuck and I can help you more directly. But the parts you've done that you've started on look good. You just need to keep going. Next up we have Lindsay. It looks like you've got some textures on there. It's a little bit hard to see at this distance. It's a little closer. You can see you've got the lettering there. I think you could look for just some more aging and variation here. I like the variation in the planks, but in the actual texture it's looking pretty evenly colored. And just to show more age on there would help. So but you've got some, looks like you've got some really big cast shadows, but maybe if you ray traced it you'd get some of the smaller, more detailed shadows, because right now, for example, there's no shadow around these guys, so it's hard to be able to tell light direction from the shadows. So in a bright sunny day you basically want one really big source of light, if it's a blue sky and from one main light direction and very clear dark shadows. So that would be one area to improve as well. And then I think you might need to scale your building up a little bit. It's looking a bit small compared to its neighbors, isn't it? I think I would go by, for example, if you look at the size of the door compared to its neighbor's doors, you could probably get a little bit bigger there. And like if this is 2 stories, but that's like 1 story, this should be taller and bigger. So you might want to just group the whole thing and scale the whole thing up. Next up is Vanessa. Got a nice brick texture going on in the building. Works well for this building. And then you've got the wood on the porch, which is good. One thing to look out for is the scale. So these bricks maybe are a little bit big, but they look okay. But then these bricks are very tiny, and so you might want to adjust that U and V repeat for these surfaces to they should be pretty similar. They don't all necessarily have to be exactly the same size, but they should be pretty close. And then I can't tell, let's take a look at some of the other ones, because the door, that's kind of far away, so it's hard to see much. This one's a little better. Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks like you've got some dirt and sort of variation in the door and this nice kind of wood texture for here. And so yeah, overall this is working well. I think the biggest thing jumping out is this brick texture, and then the other thing is to get some more lighting going on, so to get some cast shadows to give it a sense of light direction, and helps kind of place the objects in the scene better when you do that. Next up is Chris. So yeah, this is looking good. Yeah, the kind of siding works well. It's good texture there. I think that this is looking kind of flat, like a bit too much of a solid color, and it'd be nice to have some of the wear and tear looking stuff on that. The wood texture is working okay for these. And again here it's looking sort of like a solid color, so getting a texture from there too. The signage looks good here, and it looks like this is at an angle, so I think you might want to rotate that so it's perpendicular to the instead of these diagonal lines. They don't look quite right. Let's see if there's another image to look at. There's one. Okay, yeah, so here they look straight, and I think you just need to adjust them for there. So back to that other example from earlier, if I need to rotate that same thing, place 2D texture, and you can just rotate that. Oh, sorry, I did that thing there. Here, let's just go ahead and, there we go. So if I need to rotate this, just like so, you can rotate that texture around. So if it's at an angle like that, I can just take that and straighten it out. And this angle. And yeah, you can see you got these nice clear cast shadows here, and we're brightly lit here. Some of this is going to shadow, so that's nice. We've got a texture on the door here, and that's good. So yeah, I think the big thing that just jumps out is getting that straightened out, and you might want to make a new material and assign it to those individual faces if that's necessary, and then rotate those to straighten them out, and then just get something going on with these other surfaces. You might go to like cgtextures.com and download a free kind of rusty painted metal or something like that and try assigning those, see how that turns out. So next up is Chris. Looks like some crashing problem with ray tracing that really shouldn't happen in theory, but obviously you weren't able to get the cast shadows because of that. Yeah, these textures are working well, and I can see you've got something on the white, which is good. I might have gone a little less bright on the light because things are starting to get washed out in certain areas. Yeah, that's looking good from here as well. You might try something else with the roof because it looks kind of, the scale isn't quite working right, like in that side. Um, those kind of stripes on the side look a little odd. So maybe if you just put an additional kind of crossbeam piece along these sides that had a texture that worked for that, and then yeah, try something with the top. But the rest of it's looking pretty good. Yeah, you got this sign going and stuff. Yeah, so yeah, I think the only thing I'm missing out on is the shadows. And yeah, it'd be great to, always attach your scene file and your source images, your textures when you have these kinds of problems, and I can try and troubleshoot and see if I can find anything. It's hard to know, if the program's crashing, it's hard to know what that is. The version I recommend for this class is Maya 2015 using Service Pack 6. So sometimes, if your Maya isn't fully updated, you can get odd behavior. But it's hard to say without looking at the scene file what might be causing that. Karen's next. Yeah, so this wood texture is working nicely for the siding. It's hard to tell what's going on the roof. It looks like a pretty solid red. For these doors and windows, besides those being a bit too bulky, finding that clashing with this aged wood. It's a very bright, saturated, kind of orangey brown, and it really kind of pops out too much. I mean, obviously you can have different colors going on, but it looks a little unnatural next to this very kind of pale, somewhat damaged wood to have these very bright, solid colors. So I'd look for a different texture for those doors and windows. And yeah, actually your placement is a little strange here. It looks like the church is in the middle of the street. Oh, but you did mention in your other post that you have trouble moving it, and we've said that you should delete history and move it. So it'd be great to see some new renders with that placed correctly. The other thing is getting some cast shadows with the lights to try. So it'd be great to see that as well. Next up is Angela. So yeah, this looks really good. One thing you might want to consider sort of differentiating the deck from the wall, because you'd imagine they were made of different woods. Even rotating this horizontally rather than vertically might be good, because I think it's unusual to have a wall built with vertical pieces. It'd be more common, I think, to have them horizontal. I'm sorry. Yeah, horizontal. Yeah. So maybe try that. And getting a little bit too much repeat on the roof here. But yeah, I think the deck looks okay. It's just that since these match perfectly, and it's almost like one continuous piece that just bends at the corner, which looks odd. And I think it will look nicer to see those. Maybe just a different texture altogether probably would be best. Yeah, this is an interesting camera angle. It's always good to have foreground objects in there. You've got your cast shadows here, which is good. Yeah, I think maybe these are looking a bit like a solid color from here, so maybe a texture that showed some aging and damage on those columns would be good. This on the pool hall is looking pretty good. Yeah, and the cast shadows are looking good from this angle as well. So yeah, overall this looks good. I think differentiating the wall from the porch would be good, and looking to do stuff on the roof so we don't see such a repeating pattern. Maybe again with the green, if you could get it to get some damage and some variety in there so it's not such a solid color green, that would probably help. You might take like a wood texture and go into Photoshop and do like a play with the color. If you have a texture that you like, let's pretend that you like this one, this wood texture, but you want it to be a different color. One thing you could do is over in their adjustments layers, here adding an adjustment, you could click on Hue Saturation, and then you could just drag this until you find a color that you like. So let's say you were going for that green. Maybe I want to be a little desaturated here. You can adjust the lightness too while you're at it. It's kind of like the contrast. Anyways, something like that. So then you could apply a texture like that to a surface like this, and then instead of having a solid color green, you're getting the wood grain in there, but with the color that you wanted, so it has that variation. Next up is Megan, and we're getting it's good you got your texture on here. We're getting a very kind of obviously repeating pattern, so that's where I might try reducing that U and V repeat, so at least to kind of mitigate that problem. And then you sort of lose these cross beams here a little bit because it's exactly the same texture, so you might try a different wood for these just to stand out. Not like it doesn't have to be a completely different wood, but just something that just to make them stand out a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, just because there's kind of one thing across the whole image, you lose some of these details in here that just makes them harder to see, and even getting the sense of depth of this being in front of that background kind of plays with the eyes, and you lose that a little bit. So I think, yeah, decreasing the UV repeat, also getting shadows in there would mean that the inside would be much darker than the outside, and that would also help kind of with that back wall sort of blends into the front wall. I think having a shadow on the inside would help with that. And again, we've got a little bit too much repeat on this roof. Yeah, so sort of same issue. And Megan was running into a problem with importing stuff, so yeah, it'd be great to post your Maya scene file, and look and see if I'm running into the same problem. And I would go say that for all of you guys. If you have a problem, attach the zine file you're working on. If it includes textures, make sure you include those source images for the textures, otherwise I can't see them. Okay, Kravan is next. And so we got the nice cast shadows in here, that's good. We got some textures going. It looks like your Undertaker letters are at a distance from the sign, causing that cast shadow there, which looks kind of odd because you'd expect those to be, painted on the sign rather than kind of floating in front of it. But I'm not sure that's what's going on. Let's see if we look at this from another angle, if that seems to be the case. And from looking at it here, it does look like those are floating above the sign. But yeah, the other textures, these are kind of holding up reasonably well. And yeah, this angle is pretty similar to the other one, so not too much new information from that point of view. Yeah, I might increase the UV repeat here to get these look a little bit big, these cross beams, the siding, and maybe something with some texture on it for the doors. Those look just like a solid color. You can take that a little further. Kathleen, turn in some progress on the building. Change the color of the windows is the question. So one thing you'll notice on this is this has a lot of history, so it might be good to delete history. But first I want to see, I'm not sure how you built this. What happens if we go mesh separate? Does that, nope, it's all one thing. So let's delete by type history. And I think that the way you built this is going to make it harder to change the color of the window. Oh no, you're fine. Actually, you're perfect. So yeah, you can, let's make a new material. How about like a blend to get some kind of reflectivity, and then I'll I can tint them a little blue or green. That's very blue. And then make them mostly transparent. And then you can go through and select these faces. I'm obviously not going to do all of them. And right mouse click assign. And then we've got some, transparent windows. And if you had lights in there, you might see like the specularity of the light reflected in those. But that's how I might do those windows. Anyways, yeah, you've got a way to go on the model itself, and then further, importing the town, getting the textures on. So you'll need to catch up. Next up is Adni. Yeah, it is a bit bright. You might just turn down the intensity on the lights, would be the first thing I would try to make these less bright. The other thing is you're going to want to set it up so it's casting shadows. The other thing about this assignment is that the idea was to bring in your train station that you modeled and put your own textures on there, which wasn't done. So you'll want to kind of remove this train station and bring your own one in and then texture it and then turn in renders of that. So I would keep going on this and get your own train station in there.